here we can look at a program in Java. Some things to note. The two slashes are a comment. A comment is for the person reading and writing the program. It does not get translated into anything in the language. In fact, it is ignored by the interpreter and the compilers. And so what we can do is we can trace what happens. So the main method is what a Java program will run first. We'll be able to create classes that will have many different methods. Main will run by default when you call the class. So there's a structure to these. We write a thing called a class, and a class can contain many different methods. In this case, the main method is where the program runs. Notice that the braces line up and we indent in. So this class is called welcome. Inside of the class is a method called main, and inside of the main is some commands. And that onion-like layers of the program are controlled by the braces. The braces do not need to be spaced like this, but it is good for the human eye if we indent and line up the braces. So notice the opening brace is on the same line. So we have public class welcome brace. Everything inside that brace and the very last brace at the end of the program, everything inside of that are the contents of the welcome class. Notice the ending brace also lines up with the public class line. They line up in a column. And public static void main is a method. The end of that line has an opening brace, and inside of that are all of the commands for main. Now the system.out.println, welcome to Java, is a statement. And statements end with a semicolon. And so we can trace our way to what this program can do. System.out.println is a Java class in its own right. The command is println. It is in a set of libraries called out, which are in a set of libraries for the system. So output library, the system's output libraries are in system.out, and this particular one is println, P-R-I-N-T-L-N, and it prints an entire line. It needs the double quotes to contain a string. And we will learn these as we progress and write some different programs. Now, this can be done in Notepad. You can open up in Notepad and create a Java program. Or any text editor. Now, I'm going to skip the Notepad section in the slides, and I'm going to skip the NetBeans section in the slides because I want to focus on Eclipse, and then we're going to have some side videos of Eclipse with the different things we can do with Eclipse. So if you were to run on Notepad and you wanted to compile it, I apologize, I'm going one step further, and we would need to compile the Java source code, we would need to call the Java compiler. Now, our software Eclipse will do this for us, but the Java source code itself runs on a Java virtual machine. The Java virtual machine is a piece of software that gets installed onto the computer. The Java virtual machine is compiled for the type of operating system you're running on, and it takes bytecode and translates it for the computer. So if you were to, let me come here, there are extra bits here. Yeah. I apologize. I wanted to, here it is. In the command prompt on the side here, the command to compile the Java program is the Java C space welcome.java. The .java is what we will call our source programs. Once you run the Java C on it, it creates a .class file. The .class has the bytecode. But when you go to run the Java program, you just need to call the class. So we can see in this command line window, someone does Java C welcome.java, and when we look at the directory, we see that that has created a welcome.class or bytecode. Then they type Java welcome, and that executes what's in main. Now, what programs will have is a Java program will have a class name, a main method, and statements. The statements are terminated, and then there are some words that are reserved for Java and the compiler, and then there are comments, which are for the programmer. All of these things are lined up in blocks. So the class name, each Java program has one class, and each class has a name. By convention, and Eclipse will warn you if you don't follow this convention, classes start with a capital letter. And so this class here is called welcome. Inside of that is the main method. Now, main can take additional arguments. So the string args is a place to hand any arguments. And we will look at arguments later on. For right now, we need to know that this is how our main statement needs to look. Inside of main are statements that end with a semicolon. These are the instructions that the computer needs to follow. And every statement ends with a semicolon. There are keywords that are specific, and we cannot use them. We can't use them for the name of our classes or the name of our variables. And we will, one of the things we'll be learning here are different keywords and what they do. In this case, public and class and public static void are keywords. Public is the availability of this to be seen at different levels of execution, and static talks about the ability for it to be mutable. Again, we'll look at these very specifically when we start expanding what we do with methods. But first, we're going to need to learn a lot of statements. And then void tells us what a method returns. And in this case, the main doesn't return a number or a value or a character. When main is done, it just lets us know that it has finished. And then blocks are made up of things that are connected by the braces. And in this case, they are what we're going to call nested. If you look, pointing from block to block are completely contained within each other. The opening and closing connection. So if you look at this diagram, they're connected by lines, and they fit nicely into each other. And this is something we have to worry about as we do our programs. All right, we have some special symbols that we'll use. They come with opening and closings, braces, open and close statements. Parentheses are used with methods. They can contain variables, arguments, different things that the method itself needs to use. Square brackets with an opening and closing we use with a special memory feature called arrays. The double slashes are how we make a comment. And then in double quotation marks enclose a string. Single quotation marks will enclose an individual character. And the semicolon tells us when statements are done. And here's an example of curly braces and how they open and close the different levels of the one Java program we've been looking at. Here are where the parentheses are used. Notice the parenthesis with main, it has string args. So main is going to be waiting for string args. System.out.println has parentheses, and inside of it is a string enclosed in quotation marks, welcome to Java. What the program's actually doing is taking that welcome to Java, because it's inside the parentheses, and it's passing it to the program print line in the Java library. So it's a way of handing things off. And there is our ending semicolon. The double slashes does a comment. So this program prints welcome to Java is something that the compiler doesn't run. It is for us to know what the program does. And there are the double quotes that encapsulate a string. When we program, we're going to want appropriate comments, and we want to think of some naming conventions. Now, I'm going to skip over this in the slides and in the book, because we have the style guide for this textbook, and the style guide we're going to use off onto the side of Blackboard. There's a reference to the style guide. I'm just going to give some highlights here. At the beginning of a program, there is a summary. We will want your name, the class Matt, or CIS 150 Web, my name, Professor Thompson, and the date you're writing the program. You'll also want a description of the program, what it's going to do. When I worked in industry and did code a lot, if I came back and there was times where, 2 years later, I'd have to update the code I had written 2 years before, I would also, when I would do that, add to these comments at the top a revision and the date that I revised, and specifically what I revised. One of the hardest parts about coding in a course like this is we're going to spend 3 months programming. It's actually a very short period of time. In industry, when I programmed, I used to program like I learned in class. Well, not learned in class, but I was doing a class. I'd get it done. I'd get it out the door. It'd run. I learned the hard way that my programs would come back to me to be modified. Either clients would need things changed, or if I was working in a particular company for a long period of time, I would need to update things. And leaving good comments were ways that helped me, my future self, figure out what the program was doing and have a note of any major changes in case I needed to go back and forth. I'm going to be really hard on comments in your programming exercises, because it's a habit we want to learn. My high school computer teacher, because my first computer only had 2K of memory in it, I didn't like comments because they took up memory that I didn't have. He used to get me to write comments, and I just started writing Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon lyrics, and he graded my stuff and gave me Animals lyrics from Pink Floyd. I had not heard the album Animals yet. I went out and bought it. So people tried to get me to comment, but it took actually working in it to realize how important they were. When we go to name things, we're going to want descriptive names. The class names, the first letter should be capitalized. If you are using multiple words, capitalize each word. We are not going to use the underscore to separate multiple words. Indentation is 2 spaces. Eclipse does that by default with the tab key. And you use a blank line to separate different segments of code. Now, we're going to use the second style, the end of line style, for braces. It makes code easier to read because the name sticks out when you're reading up and down visually. It's going to take us about 2 chapters before we start getting code. Once we start getting into conditionals, if statements, and selection statements, our code will start getting so large that you can't see it on the screen at once. And so having these indentations and being able to scan up and down to see where things start and stop is a great resource for you as a programmer. Your program and compiler doesn't care, but you will when reading through the code. So we're going to use the second form of indentation. The compiler will find syntax errors. Eclipse highlights it like a spell check would. Runtime errors are not detected by the compiler, but something doesn't work and the program itself exits with an error. And then logic errors are when the program runs perfectly fine, but it doesn't do what you wanted it to do. And we're going to run into all of these. Here, this program has a syntax error. Eclipse will highlight the fact that it's missing a double quote at the welcome to Java. This program will compile, but a computer can't divide by 0, so when it goes to run, it will give an error that division by 0 is not possible. And this program has a logic error. The 9/5 times 35 plus 32 is not how we would do this calculation. And this is something that you want to look into to make sure that the bindings are correct on it. Let's see, 9/5. This is a program that you'll have to write in chapter 3. But this will not give the answer appropriately, and maybe you can look at it and see where the logic error is. But this is a logical thing that you are going to work on. So I'll leave this to think, and if you read in the text, it gives you an answer. Now we're not going to look at the NetBeans part on it. But we are going to use the Eclipse ID, and I'll put up more videos for Eclipse. And that's kind of the highlights of Chapter 1.